Hey everybody, good to see you. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today is Sunday, December the 14th, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about mental health first aid. Kind of like what is it, and what does it mean that I'm certified or licensed to provide it? So, mental health first aid began in 2006 and it was developed in Australia, and it's rooted in very similar principles that you might have heard me talk about when I talk about emotional CPR or wellness recovery action planning. What I love about it is that it is a little bit more of a clinical approach and language, mostly because, at least in Canada, it was developed by Dr. Doug Watson, who's with Alberta Health Services, Dr. Roger Bland, which is University of Alberta, Dr. Stephen Newman of University of Alberta, Dr. Scott B. Patton, the University of Calgary, and then Betty Kitchener, who's with Mental Health First Aid Australia, Anthony Jorm, who's with Mental Health First Aid Australia, Julie Peacock, who's with the Alberta Health Services, and Richard Ramsey, who's with Living Works. This is something that was created based on material that came out from Australia in 2006. I have a book that's published in 2011, which is the second edition of it. It's pretty cool. In 2010, the Mental Health Commission of Canada also was dealing with this, and it's adapted with permission from Australia's Mental Health First Aid Program. And so that's pretty cool. Now, I recently, as of now, became certified. So I'm qualified and certified and licensed to support folks for the next 3 years. Now, I'm also an advanced level facilitator of the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. I combine those things. Why is that? Well, Mary Ellen Copeland, who has a PhD, she began the Wellness Recovery Action Planning curriculum, which is really about identifying crisis and having crisis and safety action plans. But that material was workshopped in community in the late 90s based on her own work, which started, I believe, in the 80s. And then it was put into the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's guided practices evidence-based practices based on the study for mental health that Mary Ellen Copeland participated in and conducted and worked towards. So WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, in 2026, it's getting its start with WRAP Inc. And so I like to combine all of those things because WRAP is one of those things that we can incorporate any other program into. And what I love about it, it really is rooted in self-determination, and it's about developing our own stories. Now, having said that, there's no limits to the tools that we can add to our toolbox. There's no limits to the self-education that we can do to make sure that we're being the best that we can, that we're living up to those values and ethics, but that we're also really setting ourselves up and each other for an opportunity to have deeper connections and deeper support, because it really is sometimes people and humanity that can be that thing that leads others to the care and the support and the tools that they need. And it's not perfect. It rarely is. And especially when we're operating under certain conditions or structures or the sort of frustration of the world that we're in, right? So I wanted to just take a couple moments to just point out a few things because, the internet, especially mine, I mean, hell, even in real life, I can be a lot. I can be extra. I can be the most. I've dealt with labels and fables, right? And I say labels are for soup cans, but they're also for communication. So when somebody comes to me and they say, I identify as two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, non-binary, cisgendered, trans, masculine, trans, feminine, all of that stuff, it's, cultural competence, being able to feel like I can help the person and not the problem. Having an understanding of what those labels mean, it is really just a first step into learning to listen, right? Because really, gender, sexuality, culture, who we are, self-identity is really individual, and it really is adaptable and on a spectrum. So it's easy to get caught up in labels, but we don't need to. It doesn't have to be clinical. We don't have to be experts on all the things, right? I don't need to understand all of the ingredients in a grocery store to go and shop and be around other people. So mental health first aid is really about focusing on the idea of how can adults support other adults? How can adults like me support youth and families? And how can we embed these practices into our environments wherever we are? And I have the ability and the training to support professionals, for example. So I can use mental health first aid in a professional capacity in terms of helping people who are providing care, whether it be at home or through work. And so this is really helpful for people who might be financial professionals who need peer support or need some additional tools in working through what they're having to face. Same with legal professionals, pharmacies, healthcare providers. These are folks who are dealing with and addressing people who are in mental health crisis all the time, right? And then older persons. So as people age, things don't get more clear, especially if we're talking about the changes and even looking at my cable bill, for crying out loud. I used to work for the company and I have to sort it out. It feels like used car math all the time for these things, right? So as I approach 50, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what are people who are approaching 70 thinking? So this really helps kind of help people unpack their own thing. And especially around unclarity or perhaps dementia. It's great for dealing with conversations about gambling and the harms around that. Also, things like non-suicide self-injury, and even just conversations around suicide. So suicide isn't as much as I can empathize in how big it feels and how intense it can be and how distressing suicidal thoughts or feelings or being adjacent to somebody who feels like that, it can be really overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. And even in a crisis, if I can feel safe and grounded and have these tools, really we can have these conversations anywhere. And so it really kind of helps to promote steps and pathways to support. So it isn't about me fixing or judging a person in the moment. It's really about trying to kind of listen with my heart, listen with my body, listen with my senses to see if there's some bridging that I can do, right? because there's so many resources that exist to get real world help, even if it's in the short term. It reduces stigma and misinformation. So taking the time to get clear information. It improves discourse around mental health issues. So when we're talking about, shit, we can get caught up in it, right? So this, like, having these kind of structured approaches and having somebody guide us, like me guiding somebody, for example, or when I need care, if I'm working with somebody else, that's the beauty, is it's kind of like a roadmap, right? Where we can learn to be with each other. It helps to address things like mental health challenges, so things like depression and eating disorders, gambling harm, psychosis, and substance use. It helps deal with mental health crises, which can include non-suicidal self-injury, panic attacks, the severe effects from alcohol and drug use, and, as we know, the long-term effects of that. When somebody has a substance use concern or disordered substance use or long-term, it can really impact, the personality, right? It can impact the way that person operates. And so let's see here. Severe psychotic states, right? And psychosis could be substance or distress induced psychosis. It can be sort of psychosis that comes from other things, suicidal thoughts and or behaviors, and then traumatic events, right? It's used globally, it's evidence-based, and it's really centering on lived experience. So again, it's like, as much as I can look like a guy who wants to be an expert on all the things, I'm really only an expert on what I've been through and how I get through it, and then the expert on knowing that people are the experts on themselves, right? It helps us to understand, again, 2SLG TBQIA experiences. If I haven't had that lived experience, I don't necessarily have to in order to be helpful, but it helps to know, what's in my lane versus what's in somebody else's. Confusion and dementia in older folks. Considerations when offering care for a person who has what's called an intellectual disability. So maybe somebody has a learning disorder, or maybe they need some extra care or extra support around making some choices. And it also helps folks who live with or experience or have come to wherever we are. So I'm in Canada, but people who have immigrated to Canada. And, sometimes that's to live the dream. It's the fantasy of, hey, I want to kind of make a better life. Sometimes it's about refugee status, right? So sometimes it's about getting access to safety that, we may not have had in our country of origin. And then I really love the idea of disordered affect, right? So I like to say, so for example, I have a diagnosis or the label, as well as the stigma, of borderline personality disorder. Well, I can think of it as disorder, or I can think of it as like disarray, right? Which is just being disorganized. So once we can action plan and once we can get safety plans in place, those things don't become prevalent so much. And it's not about curing, because we're often not in need of a cure. It's about learning how we can support each other where we are. So we talk about disorder effect, right? So the effects of depression, the effects of bipolar experience in mood and emotion, anxiety. We talk about the effects of and experience of schizophrenia, as well as the labels and the stigmas. And then alcohol use, drug use, and eating disorder effects. So again, and it's also, it's sometimes it's not just about the one thing. Sometimes it's about how all the things kind of can add up or pile on. So it's also looking at like the mental health plus the financial difficulties, or the mental health plus providing care for others, including coworkers. So really, what I'm learning, and especially in looking at the programming that came from and comes out of Australia, what we can see is that mental health really is a global priority, because we're all globally connected now, right? And it's also a case where 1 in 8 people live with challenges associated to mental health and ongoing mental health and things associated to lived experience. So, what does that mean in the bigger picture? Well, I remain Angus Wright, also Angus by Design. I do comedy, I do stand-up, I do production, I do dances, I do things, I do social stuff. I can give workshops, I can give seminars, I do a lot. But really, I gotta do me, and when I do me, it means that I'm being structured when I'm dealing with trauma. I'm being structured when I'm online, and I'm promoting peer history or peer support or lived experience or learning tools or sharing an abundance of tools. What we end up sort of getting into in the marketplace, and when we bump noses or bump uglies with other people, is that we really are subjected to a different world. So again, it's like, how do we empower ourselves, and how can we connect ourselves to tools so that when we are accessing the internet, when we are accessing these spaces that really could be quite traumatizing to everybody, and have been, especially for guys and people who, maybe they've had addictions to doom scrolling or to pornography, to graphic videos. Maybe they've been subjected to algorithms that just keep intensifying. We have to understand, we kind of need to understand how those things can really affect us. Whether we're sitting on a toilet and scrolling through jokes, or whether we are trapped in, sort of those proverbial rabbit holes of trauma that can get us hooked. But having said that, this is a wonderful program. It's used by law enforcement, it's used by hospitals and jails and clinics and volunteer organizations everywhere. So just consider it for yourself. Make your mental health a priority today. Consider what individual care means. So it's not about competing or comparing. It's about, how do we all have a shared experience, right? How do we all coexist and yet be able to get what we need without taking from each other? I'm Angus Wright. I also go by Angus by Design, and you heard it here first, or you didn't. But either which way, if something I say resonated with you, please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to let you know how we can connect or where we can connect. But please don't let cost be a factor. There's many places and spaces where we can start the work, okay? If you want to work individually one-on-one, that's also available. I have a pretty standard rate. So virtual is about $60 an hour. What I call hands-on. So because I can do energy and body work and meditation and in-person services, it's about 120 per hour. But again, these are sliding scales. It's all based on really, again, how I roll. And I am a disabled bus operator. I have experience in some pretty heavy duty stuff, and I've rubbed elbows with some pretty intense people because hey, we just know they exist. So I want you to have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning into this, and be well. Let me know how it goes. Let me know if you know mental health first aid, or if you could use some. Maybe don't spill all the beans in the comment section, but if you kind of want to let me know where the need is, I'll be happy to kind of try to do some research and address it here, okay? Take care, everybody. Follow me for more. Click like, share, and subscribe. That makes me feel really good. I get all the dopamine, and I think, oh my gosh, I got my whole life together, but it's not true. We will talk to you soon. Have a great one.